How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the only podcast, your number one podcast for Star Wars movie rankings. I'm Chris Nini, your host, and I'm joined by fellow Star Wars fan, Austin Smith.
Yes, sir.
So I actually, after we recorded the podcast, I asked my brother finally saw Rogue One, and I asked him and how he would rank the movies. And he put Revenge of the Sith at number one, just like I did, which I was like, oh, maybe
Wow.
I guess that makes sense for brothers. But he put Attack of the Clones at number two.
What?
That's the one everybody puts last. So
Man, you better not share any of his information.
It must just kind of run in. It must just kind of run in the family, our unique movie tastes. But
I guess so, man. What does he think of Batman vs Superman and Suicide Squad? Is he a fan of those too?
He liked them. He didn't like Suicide Squad as much, I think, but he's actually we're kind of similar in that part too. Actually, believe it or not.
That's funny.
But so this is our last podcast of 2016, and what was certainly a memorable year for MSU athletics, although probably for all the wrong reasons. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about basketball. The MSU's comeback win over Minnesota, but we're actually going to hold that part to the end of the podcast because we're recording this on Thursday night. MSU plays on Friday afternoon against Northwestern, so we'll hold that part to the end because it will be the least relevant by the time the weekend comes. So the beginning part of this podcast will still be plenty relevant throughout the weekend. But we're going to start off with football news, broken by 24/7 Sports' Sean Scherer, who says that it is very, very likely that Monte Nicholson will leave MSU early and head to the NFL draft, or at least attempt to head to the NFL. Surprising for several reasons, but I think I'd start off by saying I don't, or we don't, at least right now, know of any other circumstances that could have impacted the decision. There may be something, there may not. I don't know. But talking about this from purely a football standpoint, to me, it doesn't make much sense at all. I don't think at all he's going to be drafted. He's a very athletic player who came in with a lot of hype, ran track and all that, but just it has never really clicked for him on the field, whether it be in blowing coverages or taking poor angles on plays. He was benched multiple times last year for freshmen. I think he was benched a few times this year. I think he was injured a little bit this year too. So just overall surprising move. What was your first reaction when you saw that, Austin?
Yeah, coming out of the season, I remember there were rumors on some message boards and in other places that there would be a surprise defection. And my two guesses, my first one was Monte Nicholson, the other was Gerald Holmes, but got the one right. Definitely surprised, just based on the fact that he didn't play like a player that's remotely ready for the next level. I think, I'm never going to I tweeted this out, but I'm never going to get mad at a kid for trying to go and get paid to ply his trade. Same thing with Deontay Davis when he left early, and anybody else who does it. Malik McDowell, like, you know what? Go make your money. I get it. There's only such a limited window for these guys. But when you take that out of the equation, which isn't necessarily fair, but strictly from a preparedness for the next level standpoint, it's a questionable decision because, like you said, the two things I'll always remember him most for were getting torched in coverage over the middle. It seemed like every time someone was wide open, it was him and Demetrius Cox looking at each other this year, wondering who made the mistake. And then more than anything else, unfortunately, I'll remember him as I've never watched a player consistently take worse angles to the ball as especially as a safety, but just in general. I think it's interesting. The ramifications of this are interesting for him personally. He's not a safety at the next level. I think what's in vogue in the NFL right now is the Deion Buchanan type hybrid safety linebacker player.
That was my thought, and it
I think it's everybody.
And it's I think what Jabril Peppers is.
Exactly. I said the same thing today on Twitter to Brymac, one of the Michigan guys. He's got the body. I think if anybody, and he has the speed, I think he's gonna test really well. Assuming he gets an invite to the combine, even if he doesn't at the pro day.
There's no way he's getting an invite to the combine.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, he'll have his own pro days, or maybe he'll be at MSU's pro day, and he'll have workouts. But he's not getting invited to the NFL combine.
He's not getting. No, you're absolutely right.
Because he's not getting drafted. There's nothing.
No, I don't think he's
nothing
going
to take. But you're right. His pure athleticism is there. The problem is so many times he didn't use it properly.
Bad.
Right, like you're talking about the angles. I googled Monte Nicholson bench because I wanted to see what games it had happened for, and something that came up was a vine I posted from the Purdue game last year, which was a big run up the middle that saw Nicholson coming in late and taking it just straight up the middle, and he takes an incredibly poor angle. The guy runs right by him, he has the physical skills, but 2 years as 2+ years as a starter, it never got anywhere.
I do think him moving closer to the ball closer to the line of scrimmage could really help with some of those problems. A, you don't put him in those pass coverage situations nearly as often, and he's not having to cover as much ground. And then B, the angles he has to take are a lot simpler and a lot shorter. So maybe that could help him and kind of help propel him. But there was talk about him being moved to wide receiver. Because of athleticism. So I'm not that he played in the league, but in terms of different ways they could try to use his athleticism more than trying to take an angle or read a coverage. He's going to be a really interesting player at the next level. I think he will be like you said, I don't think there's any way he's going to end up. Well, not that there's no way, but I would be very surprised to see him actually get drafted. But I think he'll get a contract pretty quickly as a undrafted free agent, because that is the type of player that a GM sees, and they see a really good, starting bunch of materials, like a good, how do you put it, like a ball of clay, that if you get him with the right defensive coordinator, somebody who wants to take time and help develop him and mold him, you could probably find a decent player. I mean, like I said, all the physicals are there, the size, the frame, the speed. You just kind of got to strip his instincts down and build him back up, which is not something that a ton of NFL teams want to invest a draft pick in. But I bet he ends up on a practice squad. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he gets picked. But
obviously, right. No one's rooting against him here for any.
No, not at all.
I mean, obviously, you'd love every player to get big contract and make the money and do whatever. We're just talking here from a purely football standpoint. I forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry, and I interrupted you too, so I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine.
Keep going on what you're saying.
I think the ramifications on the next year's football team are pretty interesting as well. Instead of just replacing one safety, you're replacing two, and you and I have talked about it before. You can make a pretty strong argument that that's the most important position in that defense. So, yes, you're losing two players who did not play up to the lofty standards and really their own ability in Cox and Nicholson. But I think you can make an argument for the fact that the play won't take a huge step up, and you can also make a pretty strong argument for addition by subtraction. I think it's hard to say right now which way it's going to go because it's December, but a lot of those safeties, those backups, played a lot. Grayson Miller, Kari Willis, even Kenny Light played a little bit last year. You've got Demetric Vance, who was a big recruit. There's some talent there, but anytime you got to replace two upperclassmen, even ones that struggled the way Cox and Nicholson did, things can get messy. So that'll be that'll be now. I think that if outside of quarterback kind of becomes the position to watch, especially at least defensively. I think that's the one I'll be paying the most attention to, kind of through camps and things like that.
Yeah, and it's 3 defensive backs total because you've got Darian Hicks at corner too.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of these guys had been benched, and the young guys had been playing over them anyway. So, not that I don't think Nicholson would have been jumped, but it did make me think of Edwin Baker leaving early in a move that surprised.
That's a good comment.
In a move that surprised people. But there were several factors involved in that. One of which was Le'Veon Bell had very clearly passed him on the roster,
right?
And Larry Caper was still on that. I believe Larry Caper was still on there, if I'm recalling correctly. I'm not sure, but
Caper was the same year as Baker.
That's what I thought. So yeah, and he wasn't. So his carries were going to go down. His stock wasn't going to get any higher, and he actually had a track record to point to show that what he did, and he ended up getting drafted, I think, in the 6th or 7th round and bounced around a little bit. So he made something of it, and I don't remember who it was. Someone wrote a story about what Baker's doing now, and it was a really good story about helping athletes in college and all sorts of stuff. I remember what I was going to say beforehand when you talked about an NFL coach thinking they can get their hands on him and make something of him. That's very possible. But this is also the same defensive back coaching staff that turned Darqueze Dennard and Trey Waynes into first-round picks and made Trenton Robinson into an NFL player and Isaiah Lewis into an all Big Ten player, and
Curtis Drummond,
Jeremy Ware getting drafted by the Raiders, and Nicholson never put it together. I guess Jeremy Ware would be an interesting comparison in that sense because he was a very, very athletic guy who ended up getting drafted.
He was small though,
right? But he lit up the pro day. I remember I was at that pro day, and he ended up getting drafted by the Raiders, which seemed like at the time the obvious team that would take a flyer on someone like that. So that actually I believe. Whatever year he was drafted, 2010, I think he might have been the only MSU player drafted that year, which is why actually MSU's draft streak dates back 50-something years. Actually, that was part of the reason for that.
That's crazy.
But, I mean,
there's one guy missing from that crew, though, of coaches. All the other guys you mentioned were
That's true.
Narduzzi.
Narduzzi. But defensive backs, Harlan Barnett is the defensive backs coach, and D'Antonio was very much involved in that group. Right. I've talked to people in the program who think the biggest credit for the defensive back development goes to D'Antonio.
Yeah.
And to flip that around, the fact that guys like Cox and Nicholson didn't develop into what they were supposed to, I think it was also a bit of an indictment on some of the coaches as well. That's the flip side of this is he's leaving and he didn't live up to what he was supposed to be, but that's also on the coaches too. So that's another thing to keep in mind with that. But I mean, Nicholson, he'll light up whatever workouts and everything he does. Maybe he'll get signed to an NFL team. Probably most guys, he'll get a tryout at least. I haven't seen anything in 3 years to make me think he'll stick, but and again, there could be other circumstances that I don't know about. We're just talking purely from a football standpoint here. So I guess that's my thoughts on him. Do you have anything else you wanted to add? I mean, we did talk about what they're going to be like next year, and it was a bad secondary this year, and they're losing 3 starters. So, maybe it's an additional satisfaction, but.
Yeah, I think that you're kind of facing definitely not the same type of problem, but I don't know. There's no surefire answers, I guess, coming our way in the secondary. So you can't really claim addition by subtraction because you can't say that these reserves are definitely upgrades over the guys that are leaving.
Yep.
I think they probably are. I think Justin Lane getting a full year of corner and really kind of stepping in to a full role at cornerback for Hicks will definitely be beneficial. like to think Fayonte Copley can take another step forward. These young safeties, Willis and Miller have a ton of experience. Really, they've played a lot dating back to their freshman year. And then the two kids behind them were two of the bigger gets in last year's, excellent recruiting class. And I also think that they'll be affected a lot by the defensive line having a better pass rush, hopefully, because that could cut down on the amount of time they have to cover. It's all as a unit, but there's talent there. I like to think that with an off season of, the whole chip on the shoulder mantra really becoming real again, that they'll improve. But and then Nicholson going to the pros, I think he'll be too tempting for a team to pass up in terms of signing him as a free agent. The tape's bad, but you see teams take flyers on guys with bad tape, especially guys that can be versatile playmakers in the secondary and linebacking core all the time. So I don't know if he'll get drafted. I would be very surprised if he got drafted, but I think he'll get a look somewhere before it's all said and done.
And something also to keep in mind after the draft, there's some guys are signed to free agent deals. Other guys get tryouts. So that's something to keep in mind. Not every guy who you hear is going to try with a team. That doesn't always necessarily mean a contract, but we'll see where that is in a few months. So it's about all the football news.
An interesting decision at the end. That's the best way to wrap it up.
Yeah. And brings more questions to a group that was going to be a huge question mark going into next year. Was there anything else football related you wanted to talk about?
Not especially. We haven't really gotten any recruits lately. We're still trying to kind of piece our way together there.
Not really, no. And they're all going to Michigan, so that's we talked about it, I don't know, last week or 2 weeks ago about not only is MSU did they struggle on the field and everything that's going on, but they're not doing great in recruiting locally either.
They've been offering a lot of currently committed recruits, I've noticed recently, trying to flip some 3- and 4-star guys. I assume their pitch is based on playing time. And honestly, they have a lot of that.
Yeah.
Sell it, So it'll be interesting. I think we're in for a more interesting down the stretch leading up to signing day recruiting period for Michigan State than we were last year. I think at this point last year, they were pretty much all set with their class.
Yep.
There were no real huge surprises towards the end. I think you might see some flips. I'm not sure. I don't think they're really in danger of losing anyone from what I've seen, but you might see some flips from other places. There's going to be, I wouldn't be surprised if some guys still transfer. Now you've got Nicholson declaring early. That's going to open up another spot. I think you're going to see a little more chaos and movement here coming down the stretch. But here's a good point for football. Brian Lewerke is throwing.
Yes,
that's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge deal, as a matter of fact, because I think D'Antonio's gone as far as to say is he's kind of the guy to beat. And I know one of our worries, one of everybody's worries, was that how ready was he really going to be for spring ball? Because after missing those last 4 games, he can't really afford to continue to miss time in the spring and not get those reps that he missed out on. Yeah. And so, the fact that he's not going to get hit all spring, which is fine. But the fact he's going to be in there learning and, continuing to develop rapport with some of these young guys, I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to 2016, which after 2015 was one of the best, probably, athletic seasons among the major sports in MSU history, with the basketball team making an unexpected Final Four run and then the football team making the playoff. It was 1 year ago Saturday that it all went wrong. Connor Cook throws an interception near the end of the first half. Alabama ends up rolling past MSU, and nothing was the same again. Basketball upset by Middle Tennessee State in the first round, and one of the biggest upsets ever, and a team that was definitely good enough to win the national championship. And football goes out and has its worst season in decades. So, Austin, how how will you remember 2016 as it relates to MSU sports?
Tire fire, is that the most applicable term? Disaster. I tweeted this a long time ago, but I'm pretty convinced that somebody sold their soul for 2015, and then the price to be paid was 2016.
It certainly balanced out.
You're coming off of it. Not only was it such a, and I don't mean to make this into this huge downer of a podcast, but like, not only was it such a low, on its own, but coming off of just like an incredible year, you can't really ask for much more than what Michigan State athletics did in 2015. You made the Final Four in both sports. I mean, I honestly, I don't know what else any reasonable fan would ask for.
And at the time 2015 ended, the basketball team was also ranked number one at the
that's right. I mean, it went about as well as it could have, and then just the bottom fell out. I actually had this revelation after, and we'll get to Minnesota in a bit, but after that game, I realized that was only the second time since the Big Ten basketball tournament back in March. It was only the second time that I had genuinely been like fired up about a Michigan State. like really genuinely thrilled and happy, and like the reason you watch sports is to feel that way. The reason you follow your school is to feel that way. And that was the second time.
The other being was Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
Because I mean, Furman, Rutgers, there wasn't much, right?
Furman just didn't do it as much for me. I mean, in retrospect, I probably would have enjoyed that. I probably should have taken the time to enjoy that win a little more. But and in basketball, after the Big Ten tournament, Middle Tennessee happened. Deontay Davis left, and then this year has gotten off to a rough start. But it's been a tough one. I think my message to everyone would just be to remember when things suck, when your team loses, when they go on these bad streaks, when you have these bad seasons, you just remember how bad it feels, because when it's not going to stay like this forever. When things get back, when you win that next big game, when the ship kind of rights, that's why that feels so good. Like without the bad, you can't appreciate the good, So there's my big mantra for everybody. But
you know why?
I like to think 2017 will be more of the good than the bad. But it's hard to think you get back to 15 levels.
Well, on that point about appreciating the wins, you know why Dabo Swinney always dances after just about every win, and why D'Antonio has done it quite a bit is for that reason. A lot of coaches will say the cliche, 24 hours, we're going to make sure we enjoy this, and they mean that. They mean like literally like think about it and enjoy it, because you never know when it's going to happen again. And obviously that helped happen this year. Do you think – I asked you this, I think, a few weeks ago, but maybe in relative to MSU as a whole, do you think pride came before the fall?
I suppose a bit. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that might be a fair way to put it. I don't know that MSU necessarily got, or like the teams got cocky or full of themselves or anything. I just think they might have gotten used to being where they were. They got used to being at the top, and they got a little fat and happy, and maybe didn't prepare the way they should have for other games. I mean, it's certainly true for the basketball team losing that 15-2 game.
Well, here, I'll say this about
clearly didn't prepare for that.
No.
As well as other games.
Here's what I will say about that and what I said at the time. I still don't think that MSU blew it, really. I mean, they didn't play great, but they didn't play poorly. Middle Tennessee
they didn't hand it away.
No, Middle Tennessee played out of their mind. And, I mean, MSU scored. MSU shot well in that game. none of other than the defense, but I mean, like the stats and everything, it wasn't that bad. They didn't miss. Middle Tennessee could not miss.
Yeah.
And I really think
Giddy
that
Potts, man.
they won that game. They took it. And MSU could have been better, but it's not like MSU laid a stinker out there and lost to a bad team. I mean, Middle Tennessee played the game of their lives and deserved to absolutely win that game. And it in the sense that it was not a fluke that MSU played poorly. It was just Middle Tennessee won that game. So that's how I look back on that. With football,
yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's a good assessment.
With football, I do think there was a lot of thinking that they arrived. I mean, I'm not in the meetings. I'm not in the, what's going on. So I can't speak definitively on everything. But, I mean, look, from the top down, it was a complete failure from the program. The leadership among the players was brutal. The coaches made strange decisions. It was just nothing fit. And I never, ever thought a season like this would happen. When Kirk Cousins left and everybody thought MSU was going to go back to sucking or something like that, I said, I don't think they're going to win 10, 11 games a year, but I do think that they've raised the floor to a point where they're not going to go back to those days. And this year they did. I did not see a year like this coming at all. And there's no other – I mean, it was a perfect storm of a lot of things that went wrong, losing players, injuries, but it came down to players not executing and coaches not executing. And maybe that was stubbornness by refusal to adapt to the problems that were very evident last year. They got very lucky to make the playoff last year. So in the sense of, possible stubbornness, I'd say, yeah, probably pride came for the fall in that sense.
Yeah, I think you're right about the basketball thing too. Going back on that, it wasn't. You're right. Giddy Potts played out of his friggin' mind. They had a couple other dudes that had the games of their lives, and it was really they did to that team what the other teams that were able to beat them did to them. They attacked Bryn Forbes offensively, or Bryn Forbes on offense. They went after Bryn Forbes. They made just big rebounds, big plays. And the thing I remember coming out of that game thinking more than anything else is that Michigan State just looked shook during the game, which is understandable with a 15 seed playing the game of their lives.
What was that start? What was that start to the game? Like 15-2 or something like that? I don't remember the
exact. It was like a 9-0, like within a minute.
It was something like big, and it was and they never recovered from it. It was.
They just looked shook. They looked shaken, which was just so not the way that team played. If anything, that team, which is maybe why I was thinking a little bit of pride before the fall, because they played with such confidence. Denzel Valentine was the everything. He was the maestro like they haven't had since, a Magic Johnson almost. And Mateen Cleaves, you haven't had a guy like that. And they played such a bold, fast, confident style of play. And then in that game, it was, from what I remember, I'm not looking at the box score, but Bryn Forbes didn't play that well. Valentine played one of his worst games of his entire career in that game, from what I remember.
Right, but even, I mean, I'm going to pull the box score right now. I think part of that was Middle Tennessee they hit the big shots, and then they just never cooled off. They made their first ton of shots and that's on a game story.
Yeah, but that team battled too. That Michigan State team was just they battled all year, survived that.
I mean, injury. MSU scored 81 points.
Yeah, man, wow.
They shot. It's coming up. They shot 45. No, I'm sorry. They shot 55% from the field, 45% from three. Out rebounded them on both sides. 14 turnovers, not a great number, but in a high possession like that, not a ridiculous number. Middle Tennessee shoot. Middle Tennessee also shot 55%. In 57, both teams made 11 3-pointers. Middle Tennessee was 61% at the free throw line. MSU was 66%. All these numbers are pretty if you look at the box score, it's you think it's an even game that MSU won at the end, that MSU would eke out. But no, I mean, they didn't miss it. Every Giddy Potts 6 for 10, 19 points. Upshaw 3 for 6 from Dayton. So anyway, I think Middle Tennessee won that game.
Yeah, I would agree.
MSU didn't play great. Valentine had 6 turnovers, 13 points. Bad game. But again, offense wasn't really the problem. It was they a couple times they cut it to, I think, one possession, and then every single time Middle Tennessee answered. They made just the clutch play all night. So anyway, we're bringing up a lot of bad memories. So let me ask you this: what was your best memory from 2016, if there is one, and worst?
Best was one of two. I think Donnie Corley's catch against Notre Dame jumps out as a pretty obvious one, as maybe the only true highlight of that entire season. And then basketball, I remember the game against Maryland at home in the lime greens was I remember that was pretty electric, and that was a win. I feel like
that ended up losing. That ended. I'm pulling.
Yeah,
they were on
ahead of that, and Maryland was good.
Yeah, they lost. They lost 3 in a row. MSU had lost 3 in a row, and Maryland was number 7.
Yeah, that was a big win. I remember that being a real good one. Yeah, I mean, honestly not a ton to point to in terms of big, great Michigan State moments. I would say the Donnie Corley one probably jumps out more than anything, because I think it's a foreshadowing of sort of what's to come with him. And you might look back at that as like the first moment when you were like, oh boy, that was really special. And then what worst? I mean, losing to in basketball, definitely losing that game to Middle Tennessee was just crushing. You don't feel that way after games very often, luckily, but that was just devastating. I think we all thought they were national championship caliber, picked by everybody. And then football, I'll probably say the low point, the worst one for me was still Indiana, because I really thought that they still had a chance to turn it around.
There's so many to choose from.
There's just literally 9 to choose from. I felt that was the one, and we've talked about it before, but that was the one that was the most crushing, because there were still expectations, and you felt like they could flip it around. And then after that, it was just all downhill. Every loss after that was just sort of like, well, and then you just sort of watched it all fall apart. But I would say those are the worst. But I guess the best. We'll go back. Well, I'll end on my positive note. The Donnie Corley one is still pretty positive one in my memory. What about you?
It's the only rivalry trophy that MSU has now, because
Woo!
Made that play. In terms of worst, I mean, I guess Middle Tennessee would have to be that for all the reasons you said. Worst for football, like I said, there's so many. The worst moment for them, I'm down to 2. One is letting Northwestern score 54 points, the most points ever scored by an opponent at Spartan Stadium. And this Northwestern offense is awful. They finished 6-6. They were among the worst scoring teams in the country. They allowed 54 points. That was amazing. It's either that or it's the Illinois game, because that became an indictment of everybody in the program, I think. When Illinois did not want to be there at all. They didn't cross their own 30-yard line until about 2 minutes left in the first half. MSU kept driving into the red and into Illinois territory, and then just kind of not doing anything with it. And they could have put that game out of reach so quickly. And then all of a sudden Illinois gets going on the ground, and MSU looks like they're going to pull it out after RJ Shelton makes that crazy catch on 4th down. And then they let Jeff George Jr. drive down for the game-winning score, aided by 2 pass interference penalties. But Jeff George Jr. just drove on you. And Illinois was so bad this year, and they beat MSU. And that was a complete indictment of everybody in the program for not being ready to play, not adjusting, not giving.
That was my second choice.
It's either
that my second choice for football.
It's either that or Northwestern, because that Northwestern game is going to be on the record books for a long, long time. And
I had to witness that with my own eyes. That was just terrible.
It was, this wasn't even a good offensive team. Northwestern was not. Northwestern fans want to fire their offensive coordinator, and they still hung up. They still hung 54 points on MSU at Spartan Stadium,
and they did the same plays every time.
Incredible! It was just amazing.
Post corner route to Austin Carr.
Austin Carr, or a handoff to Justin Jackson, it would turn 3 guys inside out.
Unbelievable. That was.
Those are I think the worst ones. I guess best. I don't even know what there's a best for football. I guess you have to say the Notre Dame game, but even that, coming out of that game, they won, but they nearly blew it because Notre Dame remembered that they should actually pass the ball, and they nearly completed the comeback. I guess the most memorable moment of 2016 football would be all the times Malik McDowell broke through and body slammed a running back. He did that like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Completely blew up the guy.
Jake Hartbarger had a hell of a season. The punter.
Yeah. And basketball-wise, I was looking through the schedule to try to remember what even happened. I think either the Purdue game in the Big Ten Championship, because that was a really good back-and-forth affair that really didn't actually mean much of anything, except for we thought MSU was going to get a 1 seed out of it, and they didn't. So maybe there was something online. Turned out there was nothing online. It didn't mean anything. The other was, I guess, the win at Michigan when Bryn Forbes went off. He went 8 for 10 from 3-point range, 29 points, and MSU went 14 for 22 from 3, and just kind of ran Michigan off the court pretty quickly. Costello had a fast break dunk and a tongue wag or something. But, not a lot to choose from in terms of good and bad. I was going to ask something else about 2016. So 2017, how can it that's what I was going to ask. Would you change 2016 to change, would you change 2015 to change 2016? Was it worth it? Was 2015 worth everything that 2016 had?
Yeah. Oh, I think so. I think you got to take the good with the bad, and everything the scales always have a way of balancing out, and they certainly did in those last 2 years. But I'm not going to trade personally. I wouldn't trade a Final Four. Sure, would I have loved to have won a national championship in either of the sports? Absolutely. But there are so many schools out there that would sell their souls to get to either of those, either of those levels of accomplishment. And Michigan State did it. Not only did they do it in the same year, but both of those seasons, the tournament run for Michigan State in basketball was insane. They had no business doing what they did, and Travis Trice, of all players, just completely put them on their back and won. And then they got beat fair and square by a really good Duke team. Okay, fine. You live with that. That's not heartbreaking. But that was so exciting, so much fun. And then, the football season, I don't know how you could ever trade that football season. But it ended in an absolute stinker to Bama. But, you're going to look back. Anybody who watched those games, the rest of your life, you're going to remember how they beat Michigan. You're going to remember, after this year, especially more than ever, just how the hell did they beat that Ohio State team. And then the 22-play drive against Iowa. You're talking about, you won a Big Ten championship in football. You went to the second college football playoff. Beat all your big rivals. I wouldn't trade it. Now, if this year starts some huge downslide for Michigan State football, which I don't think is going to happen by any stretch. But if that were to happen, then, maybe I'd revise it a bit. But sitting here today, no, you got to take your medicine when the bad stuff happens. And you get a Final Four and a college football playoff in the same season. I'm not going to complain too much, even after the way things ended up.
Yeah, I think you can never get rid of top level success. Those wins, especially the way they happened, making the playoff, those are things that you'll be able to remember forever. And you'll remember the Middle Tennessee State loss forever as well. But there's a lot of teams that are always good, but don't get there. Wisconsin now hasn't won a national championship in basketball, hasn't reached a national title game in football, but they're always, there to get over the hump, and especially in the fashion that some of the ways that they did. I've heard Radio before talk about would you have your program go on sanctions for 10 years if it meant you won a national championship? And people are like, yeah, you take it because it's so hard to reach where they reached. Making the playoff, Final Four with a 7 seed. I don't think you take those at all.
Either of those accomplishments.
Even just individual wins, the way the Iowa game ended, the way the Ohio State game ended, the way the Michigan game ended. MSU fans are going to be able to hold on to that forever. And
any of those wins and those accomplishments are the best moment in so many schools' history.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like any of those 3 big wins in the football season and winning the Big Ten championship and making the college football playoff, like any of those moments in and of themselves are the best moment in so many big programs' history. And they got them all in one season. And the 7 seed going to the Final Four. If that's not – it was a big story because it was Michigan State. But if that's some smaller school, like some dumb school, I don't know, like Rhode Island or VCU or some weird school, that's a story people talk about for years and years. That teams don't get to go to the Final Four. We're playing Northwestern tomorrow, and Northwestern's never even made the friggin' tournament.
Look at Purdue. Look at Purdue. They haven't made the Final Four in forever, and they're always, they got a good team this year. You never know if you're going to get there or you're not going to get there. So you take the successes with any of the bad stuff that comes in the future, and the bad stuff in the future should make you even appreciate those successes anymore. So for as bad as 2015 was for MSU, it actually is ending on a good note for them in that MSU completed a crazy come-from-behind win at Minnesota. They were down 14, 15 points, win in overtime. They looked like a complete mess for the first half of that game. We were tweeting about all the things that were wrong and how this is real danger time, and then they just pull one out of nowhere. What was your first reaction coming out of that?
First reaction was just wow. I really couldn't believe that happened. Like you said, the first half, one of the single worst halves of basketball I've ever watched, and I've watched far too much basketball for my own good, especially Michigan State. But between complete ineptitude on the offensive end, giving up easy looks on the defensive end, and just the way it was officiated, it was stop and start, just awful. Had Michigan State even been flowing well on offense, it would have been, their momentum would have gotten stopped by the refs at some point. I can't, and I know you said it too, but I don't think you can really express that win. I think is just potentially a season saver. You go from possibly being 8-6. 9-5 is not amazing, but 8-6 that's tough with 2 losses in your last 3 to a Minnesota team that, they were 12-1, looked like a pretty decent team, but they didn't play like they wanted to win all that much in the second half, honestly. But I think not only saving yourself record-wise, getting to 1-0 in the Big Ten, winning a game on the road against a team that's probably gonna be in the conversation at the very least for the tournament. That's a big win. And also the fact that it was Tum Tum Nairn and Alvin Ellis that were the catalyst to get them back in the game is potentially a huge development. Michigan State needs wing players like nothing else. Aaron Harris completely disappeared in this game. Matt McQuaid's been in a slump for a month. Josh Langford, apparently they don't want to turn a full role. I don't think he knows all the plays yet, frankly. Just watching him out there, I'm not sure he totally knows what he's doing yet as a freshman, which is understandable. But if Alvin Ellis, I mean, you get the Alvin Ellis game every year. This might just be it. This might be the flash in the pan, or it's the beginning of him actually sort of becoming a consistent contributor. He's played at least 20 minutes 3 of the last 4 games and made those 2 huge free throws to win the game in overtime. Yeah, just coming out of it. I mean, I think it's just hopefully a huge springboard, and you can't really put an explanation as to how big that could potentially be.
Yeah,
what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I said after the game, I mean, you couldn't emphasize how big this game is because they've lost we mentioned last week, they've lost the margin for error. There's no more room for growing pains. They didn't get any of the wins against the good teams they played, and they added an extra bad loss to Northeastern in there. So you can't, okay, it's a young team, they're working their way out. You can't do it anymore. You have to win. You have to get as many wins as you can. And this was absolutely a huge one to start Big Ten play and to do it in the fashion they did, to make the comeback when you're down big in a tough environment. And it was a matchup we thought Minnesota would completely dominate inside, and it didn't really play out the way I expected. Minnesota didn't really dominate MSU all that much on the glass. I mean, they're one of the biggest teams there, and biggest teams in the country.
One guy did.
And
Jordan Murphy,
21 total rebounds, but that was nearly half of the offense as a team. But they only had 12 offensive rebounds out of 41 available. I mean, I thought they would do a lot better than they did.
Yeah, agreed.
And look at some of these rebound numbers. Alvin Ellis, 5 defensive rebounds. Tum Tum Nairn, 4 defensive rebounds. Aaron Harris, 3 defensive rebounds. And not only that, Kenny Goins didn't play. He played 7 minutes. Played 7 minutes and fouled out. So Matt Van Dyke played 14 minutes. They were, for a large chunk of that game, they were playing kind of 4 guard-ish, and that's kind of what they turned to. And I mean, Nick Ward, we went nuts about him last week. I probably can't make the same Ward pun for the headline of this podcast again. But my goodness, 22 points, 10 rebounds, just carried the offense for a stretch there when they were making that comeback. 4 blocks. He was starting to get double teamed, and I was thinking, okay, now MSU has to work on how he feeds out of the double team to find the open guy and work with guys move around to get open. Instead, he was just going over the double teams and scoring. And I mean, we praised him to no end last week, and it's the same stuff this week. His confidence is just off the charts. I said during the first half when they were struggling is that he was the only guy playing with any type of confidence on the offensive side. He's the only one who you felt kind of knew what he was doing and wanted the ball and wanted to make a play. Everybody else didn't really seem to want to, and that kind of sparked him. Not a whole much you can say about how good he is, except for 4 for 13 at the free throw line. MSU was 10 for 22 as a team, but it's a situation where you can't be too picky with him because he's carrying you right now. And
right, he's got to play.
It comes with it, and he's still number 1 in the country in fouls drawn for 40 minutes. He's drawing 10 fouls per 40 minutes. Part of the reason MSU got into the double bonus and the bonus so quickly was because he kept getting to the line. Now he took nearly all of those. He took more than half of those free throws himself, but it does open up more free throw opportunities for other guys.
Yeah, I think it might be time to stop calling him a poor man's Zach Randolph and just call him Nick Ward.
I think it was. I don't know if it was Ducking Delvon on Twitter, someone mentioned I think Ward already has something like 29 blocks this year, and
Yeah.
Randolph only had like 22 or something like that for his whole freshman year. So there's that too. Question: I didn't get this. Everybody calls him Puddin'. Where did that come from? I missed this.
I honestly am not entirely sure. I think it was a guy on Twitter called Luke and Rally, which is a hysterical Twitter handle to begin with. But I saw somebody refer to him as Big Puddin', and I just love it. I don't know what it means. I don't know why. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I just think it's amazing. So I'm pushing Big Puddin' for just the rest of his time at Michigan State, and
yeah, I mean, it's starting.
He were to continue to play.
I saw it was starting to get traction. I was just trying to figure out where it came from.
I love it. It's some of the best nicknames don't need an explanation. That's one of them. He's Big Puddin', but he's a star, man. He's a bona fide star. He's he's an impact player offensively, defensively, and you alluded to it with him playing with 4 guards. That's when the game turned around, is when they started just throwing him the ball on the inside, and he actually started to pass the ball pretty well out of those double teams. Or he just went after 2 guys at the same time and they couldn't stop him. I mean, he's the hub of the offense, and I think they're going to have to – I mean, they're always going to run their sets, but I think they've really found something in running the offense kind of through him in a way.
Yeah, I mean, Derek Nix's senior year, there was a large chunk of games where the offense would start with him, and then they'd move out from there. And I think that maybe kind of – although they did stop – after they kind of tied up to the lead, they ended up stopped going away from him, which I didn't quite get. Maybe there were some plays where they were supposed to give him the ball and they couldn't. But other players, you talk about Ellis. You can always count on a game or two like that from him every year. Now the question is to see if it continues from him, because he was obviously a big part. Hit the 2 free throws to win the game at the end. Big part. The other guy, Lou Rawls, Tum Nairn, showed some confidence that for a stretch that we've never really seen from him, except for maybe in the Bahamas. In that he just took the ball and went, and he knew he could get to the basket quicker than everybody else in the fast break. And that's what I think everybody's always wanted from him. I think he did get his shot blocked 1 or 2 times, but creating that pressure, that's what he brings to the offense. Him slowly dribbling it up and passing around and running the set, he's detrimental to the offense because he's not a threat to shoot. But when he is putting pressure on the opponent's D on the fast breaks, that's what MSU needs a lot more out of from him to sneak a couple baskets in there like that. Kalen Lucas was so good at that, and that's actually what I was thinking of that during the Minnesota game. How often Lucas would just get the ball and then just take it to the rim before anything was set up. But Kalen Lucas was real good at finishing around the hoop, and Nairn has not been. And he's a junior now, and he hasn't really developed it. But it's still something I think you need to do, kind of put pressure more on that defense. And he did hit 2 3-pointers out of nowhere, so that was a
couple
boost.
Big ones.
Yeah, and
big ones and big moments too.
No turnovers, 3 assists. That's the kind of stuff you want out of him. Now, Cassius Winston fouled out, only 2 points, 1 for 5 shooting, but 6 assists, 2 turnovers. He still leads the nation in assist rate, but not a memorable game from him, but still a serviceable one. And the other guy I want to talk about is Matt McQuaid, and kind of talked about him on Twitter during the game and after the game.
Yeah.
He's a guy he's a shooter. He's here to be a shooter, and he's not shooting. He did make a great defensive play on the final play of the game to prevent penetration, which MSU had been allowing all game. And, Adam Ruff, the former Spartan Radio guy, doesn't think he kind of deserves to be in that mix, or isn't talented enough to be in that mix. Where are you at with McQuaid right now?
Well, if the stats bear it out, he's in a month-long slump. I think one of the things people have to remember about him, just as a disclaimer up front, is that he had that off-season surgery. It was hip surgery, if I recall correctly. That's a big surgery for a basketball player, for any athlete. So I'm not that surprised that he hasn't totally found his rhythm yet. But it's hard to say that you should. Like, first of all, I think after last night, Ellis has got to start getting some of those minutes. I think he's going to jump. I mean, he outplayed him 36-24.
Yeah, I mean, Ellis is basically playing power forward.
Yeah, I know, it's unbelievable. But the problem with McQuaid is that he's here. He's on the team to be a dead-eye three-point shooter. He's not a great defender, even though you're right. He did make a nice play at the end of the game. He's not a great ball handler, despite the fact that he was somehow the backup point guard for stretches last year. His best role is going to be as a guy who is almost in a Forbes type role, where he's coming off screens and launching threes. Now, the way that this team is built and the way that they're just going to at times really struggle to score, it's hard to play him in this slump. But the other side of that coin is that how do you get a shooter out of a slump? You got to let him shoot. I don't know. I don't think he should be out of the rotation because at this point, no one. I guess I should take a step back. The concerning part of him continuing to get so many minutes is that no one is challenging him for those minutes. The fact that Aaron Harris can't step up and claim some of that, that Arns isn't doing much of anything, although I don't know that he'd be playing that position. Josh Langford is playing minutes but not making a huge impact. I don't know. I want him to get out of the slump. I think he just needs to keep shooting, but at the same time, he's hurting his team by being an inefficient shooter. I don't really know how else to say it.
I mean, yeah, he's just got to start making shots. He's at 32% from three on the year. Last year he was
over 40 last year.
41%. Although 27, he's just about to hit the total number of shots he took last year. The three-pointers. He took 66 last year. He's at 59 this year. Yeah, I mean, not much to say. There aren't hot shooting guys you can put in ahead of him. I mean, I guess the other thing would be you'd say Aaron Harris, but Aaron Harris has his own problems going on and is notably absent for long stretches of games. And that's your senior. We talked about him a lot last week again. So not to re-harp on everything, but Aaron Harris is the guy who has to step up and carry this team right now. I mean, Nick Ward is carrying it, but they need Aaron Harris to be the guy. He's the senior. He's got the experience. He played in the Final Four. It's not playing in the Final Four. I'm sorry. Or did he? Did he? No, I don't remember.
No.
But he
was on the team.
Yeah, this is his second year in the system, third year in the system, second year playing. He knows everything now, or he should know everything. As opposed to the freshman, he's the guy who's got to bring him along. So that's where they're at right now.
I think as other guys, hopefully, as when Bridges comes back, I think when he gets back in the rotation, I mean, Van Dyke's probably out after he's back, but it'll be really interesting to see what they do in terms of splitting up those minutes. I really think, and there's going to be something in the Northwestern preview on it tomorrow, and you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think this team is going to be best off moving forward, going 4 out, 1 in.
I'm starting to think that too.
You have Nick Ward as your hub, and then, Bridges kind of plays that middle area where you don't want to put him in the corner all the time. He's not a spot-up shooter, but that's how it's going to work best offensively, I think. The pick and rolls with Nick Ward and Cassius Winston, or even Bridges and Cassius Winston, push Ward out a little bit, whatever. I think that's going to be the best way for it to work offensively. And defensively, one thing I noticed, and they were talking about it in the broadcast, and it made a huge difference. It made a notable difference when they switched to it. But because they were playing those 4 guards together, they just started switching everything on the perimeter defensively.
Right.
And it completely slowed Minnesota down. They had no answer for it. They forced. It was like none of the big guards for Minnesota shot that well. Coffey went 5 of 15. McBrayer 4 of 10. Mason 5 of 14. I mean, they forced him to take tough shots, and I think Michigan State's going to defend, even when Bridges is back, they're going to struggle to defend the post. End of story. There's literally nothing they can do about it. They're going to struggle there because they're just short. It's the end of the story. But I think by switching everything 1 through 4, and when Bridges is back, he can defend all 4 spots. If they can switch everything and just make life a living hell out on the perimeter, that is going to create turnovers, it's going to create frustration, and not a lot of teams in the Big Ten are built to just dump it into the post and go. I mean, really, how many Purdue?
Purdue looks good. Purdue looks so good.
Purdue's built to beat that.
They are going to wreck this. They are going to wreck this MSU team.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that. I think Indiana's going to have, they've got Thomas Bryant.
Indiana just lost to Nebraska, so who the heck knows?
I know, that's true. But not a lot of teams are built to play that way anymore. So it's kind of by playing that aggressive defensive, maybe with even a little bit of trapping, which they don't do much of. You force the opponent's hand to play a style that not a lot of teams are comfortable playing anymore. So it was cool that they had that little change up in there as like a different way to play defense instead of just always going that straight man to man. So I thought that was interesting. That was one thing I noticed as that game went on.
So, and my other question on that is, how do you think Miles Bridges fits into? I mean, because they made that big comeback, and that was big win without him. And they think he'll be coming back soon. Don't know about Friday. Last I saw,
I don't think he's playing tomorrow.
You add in that. How do you think he fits into where the team's at right now?
Well, I mean, they need him. They need him. He's the only other guy that can. You saw it against Northeastern.
The only other guy who can probably make his own shot.
Yeah, well, exactly. He does something that nobody else that's healthy right now does, and even when they are healthy, they don't do it. He gets buckets. He can beat people one-on-one off the dribble. He can make threes. I mean, he's a projected lottery pick for a reason. He's a weak side shot blocker. He can check those stretch fours that killed Michigan State against Northeastern. Like, he's a difference maker. Now, I mean, if Ellis keeps it up, they'll find minutes for him too. They'll move him to the 3. One of those other guards will get pushed out of the rotation. But I think he'll fit in hopefully well. I think what last night did for them and what hopefully the win over or 2 nights ago did for them, and what if they can hang on against Northwestern and kind of the way the schedule shapes up, what that's doing for them is it's giving them time to let him get healthy. This team has a little bit of confidence now. Hopefully they can, what is it? It's Northwestern and then Rutgers and Penn State, and then they get Minnesota again.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
He should come back somewhere in that stretch. So they have time to ease him back in, let him get healthy, let that ankle heal up. But I think he'll fit in really well. I mean, defensively, he can check any position. Offensively, like you said, he's a mismatch. Not a lot of guys can check him. So you get a guy like that back, there's not a ton of downside. There's enough guys in that rotation that are still struggling that he can help make up for that.
And that was we talked about this last week. We said in this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 this 5-game stretch, we said probably anything worse than 3 and 2 would be a disaster. And they got the hardest one out of the way. And it was. I mean, I mentioned having to just pick up wins, and now you have Northwestern, Rutgers, Penn State, and Minnesota again. Not to say any of those are gimmies. In fact, 3 of them, they have less than a 65% chance in KenPom. But those are winnable games. And if you're going to be without Bridges, that's maybe the stretch where you can afford it. Now, by the time people are listening to this, maybe MSU lost to Northwestern, and that was all a lie. But at the time we're saying this, this is a key stretch where they have to pick up wins. And for these next 4 games, if they can go 3-1, I think they'll be in real good shape. That would put them at 4-1 in the Big Ten, and as things get as they get tougher. So can't keep saying enough just how big that win was. Now, if they go lose to Northwestern and Rutgers, maybe it doesn't. But
right,
I think at the time we're saying this, it appears to be a big thing moving forward. So.
Yeah, just momentum. I mean, confidence. This is a young team.
It's a team that needed confidence. It is a team that needed that. And mention the Oakland game. They couldn't put a team away. We questioned if they had that was a mental part of it. And making that comeback yesterday, making that comeback against Minnesota, that there was a mental part to that, which I think was huge.
Yeah, I think it's a huge mental hurdle that they cleared in that game. It's young guys. I mean, guys like Cassius Winston, Josh Langford, Nick Ward, all these freshmen, even the guys that were on this team last year. Denzel Valentine carried them through a lot of those big moments, and these guys don't necessarily have those.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that we can do this proven attitude, or they haven't had to do the heavy lifting in the past. So to have to go on the road, do that against what looks to be a tournament team or close to it, it's got to have them feeling good, and hopefully they can ride that wave.
Yeah. So quick thoughts on Northwestern. They're number 42 in KenPom, 12-2 on the season. Only losses are to Notre Dame on a neutral floor and Butler on the road, both of which by less than 5 points. They're not maybe the Northwestern team people used to remember. They're not particularly bad in anything. They're number 51 in adjusted offense, 49 in defense, so they're pretty good. They don't take an absurd amount of threes compared to other teams. They're a pretty tallish team, number 64 in average height. They're decent rebounding, number 78 in offensive rebounding, number 189 in defensive rebounding. So it's not like some of the old Northwestern teams where they would never not even crash the glass. This team does have that ability. They have some bigger guys. Vic Law, 6'7", Gavin Skelly, 6'8", Scotty Lindsey, 6'5". Have you looked over Northwestern up for your preview?
Yeah, yeah, like you said, well, you got to look at the roster, or excuse me, the schedule. And you got to be somewhat impressed. I mean, the fact that their two losses are about as good of losses, and we know about good losses, and those are about as good of losses as you can have in Butler and Notre Dame. Teams that are both ranked in the top 25 right now. I've watched both of them play, both really impressive. And to hang with both of those teams, neither of which they played at home, is impressive. I think one thing that really plays into Michigan State's favor is that height. Like, yes, I think kind of across the board they're a little bit taller, but they don't have a true big that's really going to be able to give them Michigan State a whole lot of trouble. I think their leading rebounder is 6'6". What's his name? Sanjay Lumpkin. He's 6'6", and he averages about 7 boards a game. But Skelly is 6'8". I think he's really their biggest player that gets significant minutes. Nick Ward, I would think, should be able to hold his own against, this may be one of the only games where he has a true size advantage in the middle, or is at least the same height as the guys that are guarding him and not kind of outsized, outmuscled. So that could be really big for the offense. It's going to be interesting on defense, slowing them down. I'm really interested to see how much they go to that switch everything type of defense. I think against a team like Northwestern, where, like you mentioned, Law, Bryant McIntosh, and Bryant McIntosh, the point guard, and Scotty Lindsey, three guards. Those are the only 3 guys that play 30-plus minutes for them. They all score in double figures. Law and Lindsey both shoot pretty well from the outside. It seems to me like switching everything is going to make a lot of sense against them. Like you said, they don't do anything particularly spectacularly. They're just a solid team. I think Chris Collins is just a really good coach.
Yeah.
If you look at how I did, there's some revelation I had in the post, the preview. I wrote it all today. That they're 12-2, and their winningest season ever was last year, tied at 20-12. They have to go 9-8, which this team's very capable of doing, to have their winningest season of all time. I mean, he's taken them from a 13-win, also ran team in the Big Ten, a team nobody ever thought about. You always thought you're getting that win. And he's turned them into a very viable threat. I mean, I think if they don't make the tournament this year, that it'd be not a shock, but like it'd be pretty disappointing for that fan base. So it's a good team. I think MSU's kind of riding that high right now. Hopefully, coming off that game, going home, they should be able to hang in there. it's going to be interesting. I wish if they had Bridges back, I would feel really confident about this game because I'm not sure any of those guys can check him outside of maybe Vic Law. But I think Michigan State's in pretty good position to win. I don't expect them to win by much. Obviously they could still lose too, but I expect it to be a pretty close game. Like I said, I just think Collins is a great head coach, and they're going to be ready to go to war. So it'll be an interesting matchup. Hopefully, Michigan State can get that dub and move to 2-0. I think this is the second game out of that 5-game stretch that you alluded to. I think this is the best team they're going to play. I just think it's I think they're better than Minnesota.
See, I thought Minnesota because I thought they were an incredibly bad matchup for MSU.
Well, that's just it. I was going to say, I think Northwestern's a better team, but they're also a better matchup for Michigan State.
Yeah,
height-wise, because you mentioned the adjusted height or the playing height or whatever it was. Minnesota was somewhere in the 20s. They're one of the taller teams. Amir Coffey is like 6'8", and he's their point guard. Michigan State did a pretty good job of neutralizing that. So, all things considered, I would assume they have an even, slightly better time with it, dealing with Northwestern's height than they would Minnesota's.
KenPom has it 70-67. MSU wins 60% chance. So this is pretty close to a toss-up game.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That's kind of what I expect. I don't think you can pick Michigan State at this rate without Bridges. You can't realistically say like, oh, this is a game they're going to win, unless it's Rutgers. Rutgers, they should win. Rutgers is terrible. But, I actually, it's funny. I picked 71-67, I think was the score I put in the preview. So it was pretty close.
All right. Let's wrap this up. We've been going long. Plus the Northwestern stuff's going to be old in a day or two.
Good point.
Picks on the college football playoff.
Okay. I'm going with Bama. Definitely. I wasn't impressed with Washington when I've watched them a couple times this year, but and it's just Bama. And then in the other game, I'm going with Clemson because of JT Barrett. He's had plenty of time off, plenty of time to get right, but I did not see a confident JT Barrett in either of those last 2 games that they played against Michigan State and Michigan. I just didn't see a confident JT Barrett. And I don't even honestly – and then they didn't even play in the Big Ten championship game. So his last 2 games, I don't know. I'm trusting in Deshaun Watson. And then I'd go with are we doing championship or just those first 2?
Yeah, might as well go ahead.
Okay. I got to go with – you have to pick Bama. It's just an NFL team on both lines. I know Clemson's got a lot of talent, but I'm picking Bama until I see somebody beat them.
I'm picking Bama over Washington close.
Close?
Because I think Washington Washington matches up well. I think in the trenches too. I think it'll be a low-scoring game. I think Alabama wins close because I think people have been kind of underrating Washington a bit. And then I think Clemson wins big on Ohio State. I think Ohio State's offensive line has struggled. MSU had 3 sacks on him. Michigan had like 6 or 8 sacks on him, and Clemson pressures the heck out of you. So I think Ohio State's offensive line will be overwhelmed. I don't know if they'll be able to make the big plays in the passing game, and I think Clemson will have a balanced attack to go on. Clemson seems to have kind of found a rhythm after struggling at times in the year. I think Clemson wins big, Bama wins close, and then I think Bama wins close again. I'm not going to pick against them because I'm not going to pick against them.
Right.
So that's how I think it's going. So, all right, anything else you want to hit?
I think I'm good. Until next year.
Yes, 2017. Oh, wait a minute. I was wrong. I said MSU ends the season on MSU ends 2016 on a good note with the win over Minnesota, but the game, Northwestern game, is on the 30th, so it could still end on a bad note.
No, don't say that. It'll end on a great note. It'll end on a winning streak. How about that?
Well, there was a good note at the end of the end of the year at least. So, all right, see you guys in 2017.
Happy New Year.